the vision that Ashoka has is to build a world where everyone is a change maker, when everyone is powerful. And how we do it, that for 40 years, since 1980, we are searching and selecting top leading social entrepreneurs in every corner of the world. And it's a pleasure for me to welcome here our Ashoka Fellow from Kenya, Ilya, who will be talking about her innovative idea. And why are Ashoka Fellow very special people, and we would like to introduce them, is that they are trying to bring a positive change to the world, like really try to change the current reality and be a completely new world. And as Bill Drayton, who is the founder of Ashoka, said, they are not teaching people how to catch fishes or how to teach them how to, or they don't teach them how to catch fishes, but they don't stop until they revolutionize the whole industry. So honestly, there are 5 criteria who Ashoka Fellows are. Firstly, they need to have a very innovative idea. And this idea is about changing the system. And we will be talking about the system changing idea and the model, how this change can happen. Second, they have the lifelong commitment to the topic. So honestly, in our guide for Ashoka, there is written that we are looking for full. They will never stop until they see the change in the world. And that's something special about the community we are building. So one of the full is sitting next to me. And I had a pleasure to have several conversations with Ilya so far. And I can say she's definitely one of them. Then they had to achieve an impact. So we are usually not looking for people with only ideas, but we are looking for people when there is like a proof concept, proof model that works, maybe in a region, maybe in a state, and we are trying to help Ashoka Fellow to scale regionally or globally. And the last criteria, which I like the most, is ethical fiber. And ethical fiber means that we are looking for people that their motivation is purely ethical. So it means they are doing it because they would like to see a change in the world. They would like to help someone, not because there is their ego talking, I want to be seen and I want to be the one who brings the change. And last but not the least, they are entrepreneurial, which means they love, and they should have loved the question how. And that's why I would like to welcome you today to also contribute to the debate and the discussion with your how questions, because this is not about you getting the knowledge, how they do it. This also the experience that our Ashoka Fellow can find out what is this how questions, because as they love the question, they also help them to create a strategy and bring it here. And that's why I want to be here as a host, asking the question at the beginning, and there will be about system-changing idea, about the model that Ilya created, and also about her personal story. So also you understand the background, who she is, how she came with this idea. But I also want you to be part of the conversation and to bring the questions. So this is the community event. We will use the microphones, but the microphones are here just for people online. So Ilya, when your voice is not heard here, it's because people can hear you online. Just still keep saying something to microphone. And if you're online and you have any question, just write it into the chat. And there is Yitka, my colleague, who will be your voice today. Okay, if there is anything clear, so Ilya, welcome. And
thank you.
We agreed that we need to start with a small exercise, and it was Ilya's idea, and because she's the main guest here, so the word is yours.
Okay, then we'll start with a small exercise. So Rado kind of called me at the last minute and said, oh, you're in Vienna, can you come to Prague and can you come for this talk? And I thought he was calling me to have a meeting with 3 people, just at the office, like, and have a coffee. And then it turned out to be, oh, now it's going to be an event. There's going to be 40 people coming. It's going to be online. We're broadcasting it globally. So my stress level has been increasing and increasing. And this is something that we actually, are working with and dealing with is stress, right? I mean, I can think about many things in my life right now that are actually causing pretty significant stressors. And I don't know if you can relate to that at all. If there's anybody here who has ever experienced stress in your life, has that ever happened to anyone? We have is the oh is the, are the slides on? Let me see if I can make this. Does it work? Oh, okay. Oh, thank you. Okay, I'm going. So as Rado said, I'm American, but I live in Kenya and I've lived there for over the last 10 years. And so in our work, we always contextualize our work at any place that we're working. So wherever we're working around the globe, in any country and in any community, we contextualize things for that place. So some of the images that I'm going to show you today are ones that were contextualized for our work, mostly in East Africa, in South Sudan, Somalia, Kenya. And so they haven't been contextualized for you. So you have to kind of imagine. But where I'm living, women, you often see women carrying a lot of bundles of firewood, of sticks. And also you see a lot of men that are fundis, we say, and working in construction and carrying, bricks and things. And we always say that, there's a certain amount that all of us carry in life because there's stress. The stress is a normal part of life. We all have it, right? And that's okay. Sometimes the stress can even motivate us to even go further or do better. But sometimes that stress builds up and builds up and builds up. And if we're not removing some of those sticks, they can keep building up and get heavier and heavier and heavier. Yeah. And if we don't take good care, they can get to this level, of course. Yeah. So I don't know about you. For me, I've actually gotten to this level in my life. Has that ever happened to anyone? Some people, yeah? So when you've gotten to that level, what has happened, how it's felt, how it's affected you in your life, in your work, in your relationships, in your family. So, I mean, this is something that really affects all of us, in some way. So I invite you to take a minute, okay? Just take a few breaths and just notice for yourself right now, how many sticks are you carrying? What's your stress level right now for you? Is it pretty good? It's kind of heavy, but it's manageable. It still is okay. Is it getting really heavy? Or are you really ready to break? Or are you beyond that? Yeah. So just take a minute and check. And we'll do a little bit. I'll also invite you. You can stay seated or you can stand up if you want, either way. But if you want, you can take a moment and stretch up and just take a few breaths. And out. And as you stretch, you can stretch your neck for a moment. As you're stretching, keep breathing and just take a moment and notice your mind. What is in your mind? How full is your mind? How many thoughts are going on? Is it empty? Is it super full with a lot of different things? What are the main things that are taking up the most space in your mind? Take a moment and notice your emotions. How are you feeling right now? Are you excited and happy and giggling like the person in the back of the room? Did you come in with some bad news and you're feeling really down and sad or worried? And then check out your body. Just check with your body for a minute. What do you notice in your body? Is there any place that you feel is holding stress or tension? You can keep stretching if there's any place that wants to be stretched. Are there places that feel open and relaxed? Places that are tighter or heavier? Good. And then when you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes. This is a little bit of a check to see where you're at. I think it. Oh, there. Okay. So checking where you're at, this is another tool that we use. I think most of you will see that it's a thermometer, which we normally use for measuring body temperature. But in this case, we're measuring our energy level and our emotional intensity. And so when we're here in the green level, we're in charge of our emotions. We have control over our emotions. Yeah, it's a more balanced kind of state, right? And our thinking brain is working. We can think through, we can think about how to handle problems. We can problem solve. We can make decisions. This is where we can also be innovative. The entrepreneurs have to be good at being at green level because we need to think and be creative and be open. But sometimes when the stress is building, we can also go up towards orange and red level. This is when things are getting too intense. Our body changes and can start to take over. Our thinking goes down and our emotions will start to take over. So you might notice that you have got your anger starts getting so high that it takes over. And the same thing can happen when we go to blue level, that sometimes our energy goes too low and the emotions take over. The sadness can take over, but it can go too low. Yeah. So also check and see, where would you put yourself on here right now? How's your energy level? Are you at green level? Are you here, present, focused, open to conversation? Or are you really anxious, frustrated? You've been really worried about something and it's taking over? Or is there something else taking over that's bringing you very low and down? So normally we would also take a few minutes for you to find somebody and to share about this a little bit. But I think because of time, maybe we won't do that. But at least you have a little bit of a check at where you're at right now. Maybe when you leave here afterwards, when we finish, you can find somebody and chat a little bit about how many sticks did you have and were you at red level, green level, or blue level? But thank you for this exercise. I think it's nice to take a moment to check in with ourselves as we're even thinking about the work that is going on. And this is really so much a part of everything that we do. So Thank you for that.
Thank you for this checking and creating the great space here. And as I said, Ilya, at the beginning, you're a social entrepreneur, you're an Ashoka Fellow. So the goal of your work is to change the world somehow. So I will say a very broad question. What is that thing that you are trying to change?
Okay, well, basically we are, I'm with an organization now called Global Trauma Project. And we are We are working to break and stop cycles of intergenerational trauma, violence, and abuse. Through that, our goal is to see that every child and youth and parent has access to quality supports for healing and transformation, so that we can completely reduce intergenerational trauma.
You're based in Kenya, so
Yes.
can you like describe us, because we are mostly based in Europe, maybe you have some experience from other continents, but Africa is completely different reality. So what's the problem there? And can you describe the trauma problem and the system that is here right now for supporting people that actually have traumas?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, I guess I would say that, you know, in terms of, sometimes we think of, I think many people think of trauma as this like big event, you know, that there's a war or some kind of major disaster or something. That is true. That can be traumatic, definitely, for people, for sure. But we also are focused, in addition to that, we are really focused on interpersonal trauma. So this is something, developmental trauma. This is something that comes when there's things that happen between people, often within the family. It can also be then within people outside the family or in the community or society. But when there's things that happen that are traumatic and pervasive over time, that have very detrimental impacts. So these are more of, for you, many of you are in this related field, so you know maybe about the big T trauma and the small t trauma. And we're working with both, but particularly interested in the quote unquote small t trauma, which is this more hidden kind of thing. So when you say, you know, what is about trauma in Africa and how is it different? I would say these things are existing pervasively everywhere in the globe, that it is not different in that sense than what's happening here in Eastern Europe or in the United States, where I'm from. There are certain things that can be additionally maybe different. You know, if you're living in a war context, for example, you know, that's different than living in a situation that a context where there's not war. But I say that because with what we're dealing with, what we're working with, there's many things that are not so different. So, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question well or not, but
partially.
Yeah.
But when you see the problem, let's go to the social perspective, yeah, because maybe I think a lot of people here know about the impact of trauma to the individuals. Let's talk more about why is this a social problem. So social impact do you see of traumas, and why is it worth to deal with this problem as a social entrepreneur?
Yeah. I think, you know, the impacts of trauma and toxic stress on humans is probably one of the greatest pandemics of our time. You know, we've gone through COVID, we've gone through this pandemic. We know how devastating it can be, but we've all been talking about it. It's been all over the news and everywhere. We've put huge resources into fighting this pandemic and coming up with solutions on how to heal from this and how to treat it. And the impacts of childhood trauma in particular, the impacts that has on a person's development and the lifelong impacts that creates, which are mental health impacts, physical health impacts, and social impacts, are huge. So I think related to the social aspect in particular, this is where we can see, you know, I think many people have heard the the statement, that hurt people, right? When we're wounded, we unintentionally create more wounding. And so oftentimes when we've been harmed or hurt ourselves, we will cause harm and perpetuate this, whether it's with our children, with our partners, or within our family, or with our neighbors, our communities, and at a greater societal level. So we see this, related to, things like child abuse, domestic violence, community violence, where I live and work, intertribal, intergenerational violence, and war. So it's something that impacts at multiple levels.
You said what the problem is, that actually trauma is like virus that is spread. So I think that many people are trying to tackle this problem. So what's your solution right now? So just go to the idea that you have, that you would like to become a new reality. Yeah. What's this idea, how to tackle this problem?
So basically, one thing that we're doing is that we are trying to kind of embed, some of you talked about working on trauma-informed care and trauma-informed systems. So for sure, we are trying to embed trauma-informed practices and healing supports across sectors and as a foundation for work across multiple sectors. So for those that are working in the fields of education, some of you with schools, for people who are working in mental health or healthcare, for folks who are working in peace building or restorative justice, or also in livelihoods and entrepreneurship. We're really working to embed trauma-informed practices and healing supports as a cross-cutting foundation within these sectors. So we see that with things like now the topics of gender and kind of this gender focus and mainstreaming across sectors. We also see it with things like in sexual and gender-based violence, and seeing how do we tackle and work on this across sectors. So we're really trying to do that, focused on trauma healing and embedding that across sectors. The way that we do that is that we are working to build a global network of grassroots, local community mental health caregivers, providers, because we are really focused on the hardest to reach places in the world, the communities that for various reasons do not have enough support to tackle these issues. And so often in communities, there are not the level of resources or qualified, professional personnel or access to these kind of services. And so I think also many of you are, again, in this field, so you know these terms. I mean, we're really working in this kind of task shifting kind of modality, where we're working with, as I said, grassroots lay providers and caregivers, and providing training and mentorship and ongoing support to them to formalize what they're doing, to give them a more formal role in this regard, and to ensure that they have better training and support to be able to offer community-based supports that are kind of peer-led right where they are, and that they have the support that they need to deal with their own healing and their own impacts of secondary and vicarious trauma, so that they can better support other people and families in their community. So till now, I think we've trained over 600 community care providers in some of the hardest to reach places in Eastern Africa, primarily. I think we've been working in about 7 countries up till now. And those providers have been providing very localized trauma healing services to close to 7,000 people. And we've been working with a research partner to also measure the impacts of this and to really see, can really grassroots providers, who many of which may not know how to read or write and have any kind of background in any of this, can they deliver really quality supports and really get the kinds of impacts that we would, really be hoping for? And absolutely they can. And we're getting either at or above gold standard results, working with people who have had no background or previous training in this kind of work. So it's been really incredible. Yeah, and we believe that, this is something that can be scaled in many places, and that we, can really create a very strong network globally for this. Yeah.
And there are like 2 interesting points that I think Ashoka was really interested in your model. And first one is that from the systemic perspective, like what they are doing, they're trying to shift the role. People who are victims become caregivers. This is very important. And this shifting the role is the idea that we are trying to actually support in your in your attitude, because also from the theory, Ashoka Fellows and usually social entrepreneurship is not about scaling the organization, it's about scaling the idea. So if we know that the victims can become the caregivers, how can we actually scale this idea to be a new norm? And this is the new idea that we discovered here. And we can ask more questions about how, but what was really interesting when we had dinner yesterday was that in your profile is written that Western approaches is not applicable to the East Africa. Can you explain us why?
Yeah, so it's a little bit, as we were talking, maybe, interesting on that, because on one level, the work that we're doing and the way that trauma and toxic stress affects human beings is really across the board. As human beings, we are all in a body, and trauma affects us in basically the same ways across the board. It affects our physiology, it affects our sense of safety and security, it affects our ability to manage our emotions and our physiological response. There are some certain things that are the same everywhere, right? And those are the things that we try to work on. But how we do that is how those things show up can look very different, culture to culture and place to place and person to person. And how we work on those things may also need to be different in different places, sometimes very different in different places. So, in the West, or like in the US where I come from, healing supports and mental health care is very professionalized. You have to have a master's degree or a doctoral degree to provide this care. Often people are getting one-on-one therapy, meeting individually with somebody in a room somewhere, somebody that's a stranger. And where I live and work in East Africa, that approach is not the most applicable, for example. It's very communal. Those kind of providers are not available. And even if they were, most people don't go or wouldn't go because it's not a good fit. So in that case, we need to do things right where people are, with people that are trusted, and often like in a group setting or with other people, so that I can feel safer, and it's something that's more normal, and that it's even done in connection with other things, so there's some aspects of kind of like the Western mental health model that definitely do not work in other places. But that being said, there are some things about how we work with trauma and stress at the core that are fundamentally the same. It's just that how we do it needs to be contextualized and appropriate and different depending on where, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting also the professional piece, that we are actually used to have professionals, and the professional support system here in Europe actually works quite well. We can criticize it, but I just wanted to point out that we are in the reality when their system does not exist. Yeah. So there is like a complete different scenario, just to be aware of it. So we need to find a different solution, definitely. And we need to start from the scratch, I would say. And that's also your approach. Just tell us about the first building piece of your strategy, with the capacity building, because we need capacities. If we would like to build a support system, we need someone who actually is part of the support system. So what is this capacity building piece, and how is your training actually looks like? Just if you can describe it a little bit more from the beginning, how you find people, how they go there. Can we use the presentation right now?
Because as I'm talking, I can show some photos about this. This isn't a traditional presentation, so I didn't come with but I can also, let me see, it'll come in a minute. Yeah. Okay, so I just show some images as we go. But as you mentioned, I mean, we really, our whole organization is really focused around capacity building and capacity strengthening of local grassroots providers, and really building a movement and a network of those caregivers. So these are some trainees in Juba, South Sudan, that we're going through. Let's see, through the program. So basically, what we have, the way that we're working is that we always work with local partners. So for example, I'll just give here for an example, like if GTP were to ever work with any of you as an example, we would always, if we were to work in Czech, we would have to work with a local partner. So if it was, you all through the schools or something, that's how we work. So we don't go and set up a GTP organization or something here. We work with a local partner. Through that local partner, we then decide how to identify the trusted people who are the go-to people in the community for these kind of topics. So like if somebody's experienced a rape, for example, which is often not comfortable to talk about, who do they go to talk about it with? Yeah. And those are the kind of people that we want to identify and find. Yeah. So it depends on the partner and also the topic that we're focused on. If we're focused on working with the schools and with parents and teachers, if we're focused on working on gender-based violence and sexual assault and things in the community at a community level. It will depend on how we find those people. But the partner will work to identify the trusted providers. Those providers are the ones that then can apply to this training program, a fellowship program, and it's normally done as a certification program. So typically we run this in conjunction with one of the ministries, the Ministry of Health or Ministry of Education, to work towards formalizing the certification and the role and the credentials that people are getting. So this is part of the training kit, the toolkit that people get when they go through the program. Normally, it's run as a 4-month program where there are several weeks that are more intensive kind of classroom training. And then there's a fieldwork component where people are actually working in the community, identifying community members that are appropriate and they're wanting to invite and kind of that are most at need for this type of support. And then they're facilitating trauma healing workshops. So that are normally for about 2 months of weekly workshops that they're doing with the same group of people. And during that time, they are still in the training program. They're receiving mentorship and support. And they're also working on measuring the impacts that they're having as well. So we also support them with how to tell if what they're doing is actually working. Yeah. Just here's some more pictures of people that are being trained. This is, yeah, there's the thermometer. It's a very experiential, hands-on experiential training program. So there's not a lot of, sitting and listening to a lecture. I mean, it's actually focused first on the participants' own healing. So as caregivers, there's a whole component where it's really very personal for the trainees on their own healing. And then through that, how can they then learn to use those skills to now facilitate this with other people? Through that, we use a lot of different techniques. I won't go into them because they're very specific, but in general, we use techniques related to a lot of body-based approaches and really connecting with the body, working with the body, because that's where trauma is experienced. And we also work a lot with storytelling. We contextualize the materials and things so that it really fits for the cultural context and is really relevant, so people deeply relate with the stories and the materials, I think, that are being used. Here you see, I mean, that a lot of body-based things. If we watch a couple minutes of the video, you'll get a feeling of that. You can just keep going because I think my clicker is not working. Oh, maybe it's working. Okay. These are folks that, this is one of the cohorts that was graduating from the program. And then, as I mentioned, they are facilitating trauma healing workshops in the community as well. So now here, folks are actually facilitating these workshops in different settings. They have to identify a setting. So we also try to keep this very low cost or free. And this is important for sustainability. We don't want this to be, hugely dependent on donor funding and things that if it's not there, that it can't happen. So, they have to identify spaces basically for free where they can host the sessions and use their toolkits. They also work in teams. So no one is ever facilitating these alone, which is important for various reasons. And as I said, we really focus on contextualization of these things. So we work with local artists. This is by James Aguirre, who is a fantastic artist in South Sudan that we've worked with quite a lot. But really, this one was really talking about hope and vision for a new society and a different way of being and healing. Yeah, so I don't know if you want me to say more about the impacts or things, but I'll go ahead because I'm talking a lot.
Yeah, I think that was
It's okay?
useful.
Okay.
Just, I would like to maybe point out one thing, that because, as we mentioned, the idea is to like that there is no support system, or the support system of professionals do not exist here. So what you are exactly doing is that you are building a new market, and with this certification, you are also building a new profession of people, so they can also start building their knowledge. So the idea is quite broader, what I see here, that you actually are building the capacity of certain individuals, but they can actually grow. And that's why we can actually create a market of this mental health caregivers, which is very important, how actually the social change can start and can happen.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, maybe tell us more about the partnership, how you work, because you mentioned that you work in South Sudan, you work in Kenya and different countries. So how does the model work? And my question is, who finances this? Yeah, because you are working with low-income communities and traumatized communities in Africa. So someone needs to pay this. And where the money comes in.
Yeah. So, I mean, of course, this has been a challenge for us, as you can imagine. Right now, there's been kind of two main ways that funding can happen, and that projects that this, can be implemented. So one is if we have direct philanthropic donor funding for an initiative. And this is, through private donors, philanthropic donors. This has happened, but it's the minority for us. It hasn't, it's not our main way of working. More so, we have, as I said, we've worked, well, we always work in partnership, but normally through a lot of the larger partners, which is UN agencies or larger international NGOs, that they have also obtained funding and want to integrate this kind of work into the work that they're doing. And so through that, then we normally work through contracts with those partners, and we're contracted then to work with them on this kind of initiative. That's how it's. Those are the two main sources.
I think that there will be more how questions from the audience, but let's finish like the official part of the interview and our talk, because as I said that Ashoka Fellows are people who have this lifelong commitment to a topic, and your life mission is to help these hard-reaching communities to build a resilience in mental health and helping with trauma. Where did this life mission and your life commitment come from? So what's your story?
The personal story. And definitely I think my, the passion has been, how can we get this kind of healing supports, really good quality and impactful healing supports to people and in places where those supports they don't exist. They're not there, or they're not accessible. People are not accessing them. So basically, I mean, I think this passion for me started very young, very, very young. I came from I grew up in Iowa, if anyone knows the US, in the middle, in the corn area. And where I grew up, I told you yesterday, it was like a middle income area. The houses were good. And we had very green grass with the automated sprinkler systems. So everything was watered well and the grass was really green. But many times I think people didn't know what was going on inside some of those houses. And things looked good from the outside, but you didn't know what was going on the inside. And mine was one of those houses. So I grew up in a way where there was a lot of childhood trauma, abuse and neglect going on within the family. And this had a very, very deep impact on me. I started really, wondering from a young age, how do people want to live, want to survive? What motivates you to want to survive? Because if you're living in that kind of a painful environment, for me, I felt I didn't even want to live. So I really wondered, how is it that people survive and want to live, and how can they even smile and be happy? What is needed for that? And this was really, I think, a driving question for me in my life.
How old were you when you asked this question?
It was about 7 when I started asking this question to myself, and looking in other people's windows at night when the lights were on, and wondering, like, what are they doing inside there? Are they happy? How is the family working? And really, and feeling, is there anybody that will come and help me and my sister and brother? Is there anybody that will come and help us? Please, I hope that somebody will come and help us. And it didn't happen. So I think that was the part that really pushed me around this. When kids and families are really needing help with these things, and it's invisible, how can it become not invisible? How can we identify what's happening? And how is it that somebody can come and help and really do something? Yeah.
Just continue with your story. So what happened? Because we are right now here when you are 7, you are asking like very existential question. Honestly, I can't imagine that you are 7, and yesterday you told me that you asked the question, where does this desire to live come from? Where does this desire that others have come from? And you are just 7. So how we call it change-making journey, actually continue. Just if you can briefly go through your story and tell us, how does it happen that you are here right now and who you are today?
Okay. Yeah. So, I think those questions started very early. And I mean, for me, again, the impact at that time, it was it was not maybe what you're having with your son, which is really nice, supportive and nurturing. It was incredibly isolating and very painful as a child to grow up in that way, feeling that you're completely alone in the world, and that there isn't any safe place or people that you could go to for comfort or for help or for any of your needs, right? Even food or whatnot. And so I think for me, I started asking those questions, and then I had a passion to start to volunteer with other children who were going through that kind of experience. Because I think in that, it kind of created a sense of purpose for me, or some kind of meaning. Even, I think I started volunteering when I was 9 with other children that were in residential programming. And it really gave me, I think, a feeling of I'm not alone. There's other people who are also going through this, because I really felt I was the only one that was experiencing that. And so in feeling, okay, maybe that there are other people, and maybe I could do something to even help. And so that somehow gave me some kind of empowerment, and although I was very small, and some kind of good feeling of I can maybe do something to make somebody else's life better. And in that, maybe even me myself, I'll feel better. Which is interesting, because that's basically what we're doing now, right? Yeah, and so through that, I also really started, my interest was then in working and supporting children that were going through these different types of abuse and traumatic experiences. And I worked on that for a long time in the US, working on systems building and with a lot of across many different types of systems in the United States. But it also took me to really asking those questions about what do we as human beings do to heal? What helps us heal? And what helps us to get through difficult things? And I started trying to look at that question by visiting and working with different programs in India, in Ethiopia, in the US, really in different places in the world, to really see how are people addressing this? How are people working on this? And what is the most effective? And through that, and through my work on doing trauma-informed systems change in the United States, we started piloting some things with some partners initially in Ethiopia. And initially also even looking at even the role that very local providers are playing. Like in Tanzania, we were looking at the role that witch doctors or traditional healers, are playing around mental health and trauma and decreasing violence and abuse. So we started some piloting with these partners, which then eventually grew into what we're doing now.
And you created a program that is right now
Yes.
licensed and you're building capacities. Can you just at the end mention the numbers? You said you trained over 600 people, right?
Yeah, maybe I can put that. So for now we've been working, as I said, primarily across Eastern Africa. Here. Also, we've had initiatives going also in the United States and a small pilot in Greece with refugee community. We've had about approximately 375 community healing cohorts. So community healing groups that have been taking place across these countries. We've had about 6,800 community participants that have gone through this, and that are impacting about 34,000 children through this. And then I guess also because you have a lot of technical people here, they might be interested in the impacts. So we work with a research partner, the New School for Social Research in New York, that works on mental health and trauma in particular, but also works on measuring psychophysiology. So we're measuring mental health impacts such as PTSD and depression. On PTSD and depression, we're seeing at or higher than US gold standard impacts on decreases on post-traumatic stress and depression. We're also measuring social and relational outcomes related to aggression and relationships and emotional regulation. And then we also are measuring physiological cardiovascular stress, because this is one of the things that is directly correlated with trauma and stress. And that one has been very interesting for me, because in the US, the gold standard of change and decrease around the physiological stress, the gold standard is about a 3%, 3 to 4% decrease. And it's really hard to get change on the physical level, especially without a medical intervention. But here we're using a mental health, psychosocial, trauma healing intervention. And we're actually getting a 15 to 16% decrease in physiological stress. And this has now been replicated in 2 different countries. In different contexts, one in an emergency context where there's war and violence, and another in a development context that is quite different. And we've seen essentially the same results across those settings. Yeah. Is it okay? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, let's jump into it. I want to open the conversation. So if you have questions, just feel free to ask, but there will be maybe some time afterwards. Maybe just finish the last part, because I just wanted to bring you inputs to the conversation you could have afterwards. My last question, I would like to invite your teammate, Rosa, who is also with us here. Let's join us, please, because as you know, this is not only about Ashoka Fellow, it's mostly about their team as well. Yeah, so that's why we are also here as a team. And Rosa is responsible for scaling, right? No?
Yeah, I am supporting the redesign.
The redesign,
in general. So, yeah.
Perfect, because you see also the numbers, but there are also some challenges, because as you heard, Ilya asked a lot of very important questions, how to do something, but there are like very big questions, so the answer is not very easy. My last question is, if you can go to the previous slide, Ditka, there are the countries when you work. Yeah. So how does your scaling model works right now, and what can we do? So Czech Republic, maybe Slovakia is also here. Yeah.
Okay, so as I said, I'm not working directly on the scaling model. We are going through a redesign process that is motivated by the goal of making all this more sustainable, more scalable, and also to increase the well-being within the team and the organization. So we are in an initial stage of redesign, and actually I was telling Ilya, we're not ready to present anything, but we are happy to share where we are now. And certainly the first phase is to really assess where are we now, what has been done, how it has been done, and how can we start a process of rethinking and possibly scaling, so reaching more people, increasing the quality, the impacts, and really working towards this vision, right? So the idea is, if you look at this, you can see that the number of trainers is very small still. So this is the first point. The team of trainers is still very small. The trainings and the contextualization and the materials are very tailored, personalized. They are hardbacks, so there are no online resources. There are no resources to translate and contextualize the materials in a more formalized, standardized way. So that's the second point. First of all, to really look at increasing the team of trainers at global and national level. That's the first need. The second would be to look at the training program and the training materials and formalize the program even more and create an online platform. find a way to contextualize and translate the materials so that the model can be more easily replicable in other countries. The same for the workshops and the tools for the workshops. Also, for example, every contextualization has implied in the past an assessment mission. So the team would go in the country, assess the needs and the situation, and then develop a tailored program. This requires a team, and it requires resources and time. And the trained providers, community providers, have been getting lost because there is no formalized platform or network that retains them and allows them to be visible, to be recognized, to be accessible, to be supported, and in a systematic way. So this needs to be developed too. The same also with the measurement of the impact. The measurement of the impact means that we need to formalize a manual and the methods and to train the people to measure the impacts in their own countries and have resources to also analyze quality data and disseminate. So if you remember, also Ilya mentioned, it is important for us to mainstream this trauma healing in the sectors to raise awareness. And so very little has been done there because the organization has been focusing on working on the field. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, yes, there is a little website, but there is very little resource has been used for conferences, promotion material, productions. Many ideas like production of videos, of radio programs, of online resources are still ideas. Mm-hmm. And they allow scaling. They allow reaching more people, getting quality, and creating more impact. So these are some of the ideas we are working on. And yes, no, sorry, there is a last point. And we're looking also, we are also realizing that to be able to scale and to be ready to scale, to be ready to be investment ready, a consciousness shift and a capacity enhancement has to happen within the organization. It's a new way of thinking, a new way of operating. And these capacities need to be acquired. So we need also partners that help us in this endeavor to become ready to scale, to become ready to for investment and to be able to do this, let's say, step, this jump. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing the also the challenges. And I would, at the end of this like official conversation, I would say that like the core of the work of fellows is that they enable others to be part of the change. And you can see it also in the numbers, because if you see the problem that children are traumatized, you can go and directly help them, but your impact will be really limited. It doesn't matter, it doesn't have any sense, but if you would like to bring a real change, you need to work completely differently. And you need to scale the idea to help the others to be part of the change. And you see it, you train the trainers, or you actually create the trainers, then can create the community health volunteers, which are trained, and they can actually spread the idea as a virus, but the positive one, and they have the impact. So this is like very systemic approach that we see, but the challenge is how you can actually scale this to a new level. Because when you see the like real scale of the problem globally, this is like nothing. And that's a new way of thinking and new challenge. How can we really solve the problem that exists on a global scale? Thank you for coming here. Thank you for your story and your also vulnerability and openness to share it and also inputs the conversation. And I will ask you, if you have any questions, just feel free to ask and open it. And if there are any questions of those of you who are online, just write it into the chat and Yitka will read it. Yeah?
Can we give all the
microphone. Okay.
video that they can show if you want.
Right now or afterwards? Okay, at the end. So if there is any question, just take a mic.
Sorry, I just jump in like a popcorn into the middle of discussion. Sorry for that. My question was basically based on, you said in America or United States, it was more a question about the middle class or the issues are in the middle class. What's the situation in the Africa? If it's middle class or it's lower class, I don't know how even if any classes exist there. What's in your numbers? And my second question was how you use the methodology to get the feedback. Because that's if you do the questionnaire and just the responses, or you do, I assume that for the heart rate, for the heart disease, you can measure it, but for the rest, what's the methodology for it, or what's the approach? Thanks.
Okay. So 2 questions, yeah. So middle class and like class distribution in Africa, how do you personally see it? And second one, how exactly do you measure the impact?
Yeah.
How do you actually collect feedback and what are the instruments you're using?
Okay, so for the first one, I think you're just wanting to understand kind of the context there, if that's right. So yeah, I mean, most of where we're working is very, very low income, mostly below the poverty line. And so, and we're also working in primarily in more rural and harder to reach areas as opposed to like the main capital cities. So yeah, I don't know if that answers. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to add that I think this is maybe interesting for Europe, and one of the biggest differences is that in Africa, the middle class is almost it's emerging. So the society consists mainly of the leading top class, or the very wealthy, and then the very poor. So the middle class is an emerging phenomenon in Africa, which is actually an interesting factor for the building of the market. So there is huge potential.
And the second question was about the feedback form and about measuring the impact.
Yeah,
How
about
exactly you do
on
that?
measuring the impacts. So we use self-report measures that have been assessed and translated and worked for the context. So we use those measures. We also, as I said, we also use the physiology measure, which is using something called M-wave. M-wave heart math for that. And then we also do interviews and focus groups for on that level. So those are really the three levels that we're working on for the feedback. Yeah.
So I will just answer the question so they understand if they are like trainers or the providers who assess it. Yeah. So who exactly does it?
Yes, thank you. So so we teach the trainees in the training program how to use these methodologies in the workshops. On the self-report measures, we do a more extensive measure with the trainees, and they do a briefer measure with the participants at the community level. Yeah.
Cool. I think Petra had a question. Online questions, perfect.
Okay, so first, thanks so much for the work. I find there several very interesting aspects for me. Like the first one, that you work so much with people who are volunteers. So this is, I think, very special and makes it very sustainable for the future. And also that you give so much importance on healing the healers. I think this is another very important aspect, and how you work with the body. Because I have like two questions. One is based more on personal experience, because I'm just wondering, what is the special thing on your method, if it's this like going into the body or what? Because like I experienced several traumas in my life. In the childhood, I did not grow up in a very emotional safe space, and as adult I experienced two big traumas, and I worked with it like all my life. I spent like 15 years in psychoanalysis, just talking about it, and it never went to some kind of healing. And now I'm coming to the point where I see like how important is it to work with the body, how the trauma stays in the body. And I think it's not very present like in the therapy systems. And like now we are like in the Czech society, there is like this new discourse, for example, how to use like some drugs, like when you are doing the like LSD or like some other tools that take you really down under your subconscious. So I'm just wondering, when you have so good results, like what is the very specific thing that that really helps the people? Because you were talking also about quite a short time you do the thing, so it can be very like, I think this can be very special when you compare it to the years you are spending in some therapy or treatment or whatever. So that was one point, like about the tools. And the second, I was wondering, like, because you said you are working more, that the trauma is always the same, but I think that also there is some societal context as well, that for example, I think in the Czech society, there are several like generational traumas coming from the past. So I was just wondering how you, when you set up the thing for the right context in the country, so how how you are looking for the information, how you really work, that it's not focused just on the individual thing, but also on the societal thing.
Perfect. So two questions basically. Yeah. First one, how do you incorporate the body work in your method?
The method, yeah. On the methods one, and I'm happy to, talk or more about the like technical things, at a later time as well. But in terms of the method, we have the method that we use. The more technical method that we use is called trauma-informed community empowerment framework. This is the framework that we use in the training program. And this is based, came out of work that was being done at the Trauma Center in Boston, of another evidence-based practice called ARC. So if you're interested, you can also look up ARC, A-R-C, which is really focused on childhood developmental trauma. But why this method was developed out of ARC was because the great thing about ARC was that it really focused on not on any particular strategy or method, because there are so many, but it was really looking at when children and families and are affected by trauma and toxic stress, what are the core fundamental things that get affected? How does it affect us as humans? What are those domains? And so now, if we know what those are, we actually know what we need to target with the interventions. And we can do many different things to target those things. Yeah. So that is where the methodology also becomes very translatable and contextualizable and scalable, you know, to different settings, because we are looking at those core domains. And then there's a lot of different strategies that can be used. That being said, working with the body in trauma work is critical. We have to have body-centered practices to really shift the physiology and the impact of trauma on the brain, and how the impact on the brain. In addition to that, we also, as I said, we use a lot with storytelling and narrative and creative approaches, as well as working in groups. Because part of this is also around reducing shame and guilt and stigma and normalizing and building connection and trust and safety in community. So that is another really important element. But I can say more about it, you know. The second question was about the contextualization.
Because something is the same, as you mentioned, that we are all humans and have a human body,
Yeah.
but culture and the context is also very important, because there are cultural traumas or national traumas, which are connected to people living in a certain area.
Yeah. So as Rosia mentioned, I mean, this is a two-sided coin for us, because on one hand, I think this real focus on quality contextualization is what I think has allowed us to get the kind of impacts that we're getting. Because we have gone very deep with our partners in a lot of work with the partners, interviews, really getting a lot of information from the community and working with key leaders through the partners and in the communities to identify how exactly does this look here with the people that you're wanting to work with. How exactly, what are the different types of experiences? How does it look? You know, I mean, what are the family dynamics, the gender dynamics, the religious factors, and how do we, you know, we really need to bring in these things. So, you know, in the materials, you know, you'll see when we do them, there's images and things in the materials that we use that I don't even know what they mean. But when we train, like, you know, in Bohr, people sit there and go through the training and they're like, oh, this was my uncle. Like, he's in the image. Because, you know, it's, or this is, we know about this event. We know what is here. I don't know what's there, but people there, they know what's there because we've really contextualized it so well. So people feel it very deeply. They know these images and these stories very deeply. The downside of that, as Rosia mentioned, is it's been a big challenge because, of course, that takes a lot of time and energy and resource to do that. And so this is one of the things that we're kind of battling right now, is how can we still do that to the level that I am very passionate about and think is, you know, really needs to be there. And how do we do it in an easier, maybe less labor intensive manner? Yeah.
Add something that's to this. This is very interesting. So I think this is where we are having a lot of internal conversations also, because while trauma affects everybody in a similar way and the methods can be drawn from West and East and South and everything. The collective traumas, the stories, the historical traumas, the tissue of the society, the religious traumas, the cultural traumas are different stories. And these stories, and it's about narrating these stories. And that's where, for example, working with partners who can really tell the stories, who can draw the stories, who can give faces, colors, sounds to the stories, is going to be key. We have to find a way to create a network of partners who can help us in this.
That's crucial.
Mm-hmm.
It's very crucial, and
Yes.
that's why the challenge is so
Yes.
big, because
Yes.
there is something what we have in common,
Yeah.
but the culture context is really different,
Yes.
and you really need
Yes.
a partner that understands the context quite
Yeah.
well
Yeah.
and can also create a narrative of
Yeah.
the context which is
Yeah.
reachable,
Yeah.
and that it's actually like,
It is actually
understand.
interesting because we were talking with Ilya a lot about Europe. I'm European. My mother is German and my father Italian, and that already says a story. And we were talking with Ilya about the different traumas in our families, different traumas in our countries, because some countries are just a group of people. And already there, looking at Europe would be a very interesting step for us to, because within Europe there is a common story and there is the individual story of the single countries. So it's a project we're looking into, and we're happy to have ideas, support there, but it is something that I, as a European, was talking with Ilya about. We need that.
Yeah.
We need that. Okay.
Thank you
for
I
this
think
question.
that we have more questions. I think there were online questions, then we come back to you. So we don't online questions, Marka. How many questions are there, Itka?
Just one.
Just one question.
So for just
okay.
one. So the online question is about prevention, basically, but I'm going to read it in full. Even when we have the resources to heal and tackle our traumas in Western countries, we still don't know how to prevent them to happen. What can we do to prevent to come to the highest level of toxic stress to prevent the breakdown? What would you recommend to do?
So the question is not about building a support system when the trauma happens, but the prevention of trauma. Just a different question.
So I think one is, I mean, that healing is important, is an important part of this. As we were mentioning about the transmission of intergenerational trauma. Yeah, because, you know, as we said with the statement that, you know, hurt people. If I don't do my own healing process, yeah, the likelihood that I'm going to transmit that and bring that out into my children, into my family, even into my society. As I mean, I'm American. This is happening hugely in my country right now. Without our own healing, it will perpetuate. And so, I mean, one answer that I have to that is that I really believe that the healing has to start with us, with ourselves, and that as we do that, we will be preventing further trauma and violence and abuse from happening. I mean, that I think is the biggest. I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, and we talked about also integrating and mainstreaming trauma healing and trauma-informed work in all sectors of the society. So really having systems that are already trauma informed, that integrate in their internal this awareness and this skills. And again, as Ilya said, trauma is not only a consequence of violence, it is a driver as well.
It's broad. And it's very interesting also from the systemic perspective to have systems that, as you mentioned, that are trauma informed, which is also like very challenging idea that actually these professionals that are in the system that already exists have information what it is, what is the impact of trauma and how to deal with trauma and how can they maybe actually bring the trauma to people as well.
Yeah, and not that, because I think if we the more that we can integrate these things, as you're saying, into these different systems and have trauma-informed schools like you're working on, or trauma-informed restorative processes, or what, I mean, that means that is working also towards prevention, because you're already building many types of systems and structures that support healing, but also preventing harm, because you're strengthening all of the types of skills and social emotional intelligence, right, that is needed to prevent harm. Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you.
Okay, and we have two more questions here, as I see, maybe more, Monica and Anna as well, right?
Firstly, I would like to express my deep respect to the work that you have been doing and what you have achieved. It's so low number of trainers, it's unbelievable for me. So really thank you for what you are doing. And I'm already thinking about it, how to get you here in Czech Republic, and I'd like to explain you why I think it's needed, and especially in my case, and especially in the field where I work. I'm a Romani, yeah, and I don't know if you know something about the Roma in Czech Republic. Maybe you know a little bit that it's the biggest minority in the Czech Republic. We experience institutional racism, different kind of things. There are a lot of excluded areas, where Roma are living. Many of them are living there. And there is a lack of help, like professional help. And it's combined. The problem is also because there is not enough psychotherapists, and especially Romani psychotherapists. I know only 2 of them, plus me. There is I don't know. Maybe there are some students already at the universities, but for now there is very few Roma who would be psychotherapists. And I think it's very important, to have this kind of support for Romani communities in our country, because I work with Romani women, with Roma LGBT people, with Roma students, and they experience a lot of dramas, and also the dramas that you mentioned, the collective trauma that is caused by discrimination, racism, microaggressions they have experienced on a daily basis. And this is what I feel that is very important to get you here. And on the other hand, I think it's very difficult in Czech Republic to get through the system without, to formalize this kind of support, because to be psychotherapist in Czech Republic, you have to go through a very complicated process to be certified psychotherapist. And so I'm thinking how we would be able to start this project here. Let's say it's some excluded area. I can imagine that we can go to Christina where I work very often. And so I'm thinking about that if it would be written or done as a project, and as a part of social service at the beginning. If this would work, if this would be enough for that to start or to bring your trainers here in Czech Republic. So this is my question.
Yeah. Nie poczułem. Co się stało? Aha, okay. So we're just waiting because we need a microphone. So there are still people listening, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So just we are waiting so you online can also hear us. Thank you, Monica, for the question. So how can we bring in here? This is complicated. And maybe before you answer the question, Monica is working with these communities. They're like hard reach, traumatized, and Monica explained, but they're also working with artists. And actually, it came to my mind directly when you asked the question that you are working with like local artists, that maybe it could be also a match because you have the sources and capacity with the artists, yeah? But let's go to the question, so you can talk maybe deeper after. So what is needed to bring it here? Because it's very needed for like communities here.
So first of all, thank you. Thank you so much. And I would love to talk with you more. I love what you're doing. The fact that you're only like one of, 2 or 3 or something, professionals working in this sector in the Roma community it also just totally touches my heart as well. And hearing you, I mean, I feel also you're the perfect partner, right? Like this is exactly the kind of partner that we love, that we want to work with, that we would be so excited to absolutely to work with. And I think, if we sat down, we would have so many ideas and it, could be easy, fairly easy to do. However, also, I know I'm going to have Rosiah on my back saying, don't you dare do anything right now, because of exactly the things that she mentioned. Because, basically what we've been doing in these last, 9 years or so have been, working with partners, with great partners, but without having a stronger capacity internally to, to do it in a healthier manner. So one of the challenges that we've had is, is the burnout within our own team. And so this is why we see that what would it take? I think we absolutely can do it, but what it would take right now is that we need to, first of all, we need to invest and we need actually to find some different types of support to help us to expand kind of our training of trainers. Like we need to actually do training of trainers. Maybe you would be a good one. But, this level, more of this kind of like higher professional, level of trainers that can really then take the lead and be qualified to really do that on a larger scale. That's one critical thing that we need. And for example, it's been a challenge because we haven't, and part of why we've gotten to this place and this is that we haven't had the funding that would support the internal capacity building. So we've always kind of had partners who want to implement a project and bring us in to implement a project like you're mentioning. But they, of course, don't want to fund us to strengthen our internal team. They want to fund us to implement the project with that, to do with them. So we need right now to identify some different types of supporters to help us with really, strengthening our internal capacity so that we can work more with partners on, these initiatives that, and I think why it's taken us so long, because some people are like, why have you waited 9 or 10 years to, I mean, that's crazy. But it's because, those of us who have been doing this are technical people. and we're so passionate and committed about this. Rosaya knows the risk is that I'm going to meet you and we're going to start something and she's going to be like, you're doing the same thing that you've done for 10 years. You have to stop for a minute, and we need to invest in really building the internal structures and capacity better.
But having said that, we thought about it, and what the idea would be is to really keep in touch, to keep the contact and to keep in touch, and to just give us a little bit of time instead of, jumping, because we will get there. We want to get there. Absolutely. It's just we need this kind of sabbatical, if we can call it like this, to really rethink and strengthen the model, and so that we can really restart in a healthier way for the organization and the team, and in a sustainable way, and really be able to tackle and to work, because working on trauma requires a very strong well-being, and so overworking and taking up more than we need, I don't need to tell you how it increases the stress and etc. So we thought about it, and now we are in 2022, and we hope that in 2024 we can come back to you.
Okay.
So in the meantime, isn't it?
Yes, and in the meantime, we need some other support.
Yeah, but so we're really happy not to lose the contact, to really, give us your contact, etc., and we are coming back to you.
Let's talk about it later, because we just have 10 minutes to 10. So I think we have time for the last question to officially finish the talk. Exactly, and we have 2 minutes for the video, so we can officially finish. But if you would like, we can stay longer. So if you have any more questions, more informal, there will be opportunity to ask them. So word is yours.
Thank you so much. I'll try to be as short as possible. I really wanted to thank you for this topic and for the opportunity to have all the thoughts just running around my head. And I want to say, on behalf of Joseph, where I work, we're totally on board. And if you're interested in 2024 to build a little consortium for Czech Republic, we're in, and this is what we want to do. I had one note on the prevention. I really strongly believe everything starts in a school. If we want national-wide prevention, we need to start there. And I can imagine some workshops being taught in school how to overcome difficult situations. I can imagine workshops in some communities or some cities, just to helping people overcome their trauma. And I love the type of work you're doing. There was one thing in the school context. I wanted to ask how difficult it was for the new trainers to come in their own community and start saying, look, we lived through something and we have to overcome that. Because I believe in school it would be really difficult for somebody to say, I have trauma and I'm trying to help you others. So that's my question.
Thank you. I will be so happy to be continuing in touch, and I know the rest of our team will be as well. I think your question is also about stigma. And people, really feeling that a lot of this is kind of taboo to talk about, and that we shouldn't talk, it's very uncomfortable. And what I can say is that I think through the training program, it totally changes. I think most people, it totally changes them in this regard, because I think, first of all, one of the entry points that we really use is talking about stress I just did very 1 minute, with you guys. And basically I saw most everybody was shaking their head, right? Like, has anybody ever had these? Everybody's like, oh yeah, yes. Even, even when we talked about the sticks and I said, has anybody ever gotten like to the 3 or the 4? And most people, I don't know if you noticed, like were actually shaking their head, like, oh yeah, I've been here. Even to admit that. But I mean, it's very vulnerable and personal, but you felt comfortable to shake, to shake your head and to share that, basically, right? Because this is something that's very normalizing, right? I mean, we can all start to relate to that. And exactly in that way, you can imagine if we then had days together where we were slowly, going into different things and opening up more and building trust and really like, wow, I didn't even know this about myself. But now when I heard you talk about, I'm even realizing this, and it gets even emotional because the trust and the bonding, that happens is very deep, and it's very destigmatizing. So I think at that point, when people are even setting up the workshops and things, the community groups, or, even in the schools or with parents or whatever, by that point, I mean, they start those workshops in the same way. They start them in the same way. They don't go in talking about trauma, about, have you been abused? What was the violence? What was the, no, I mean, we say, no, I mean, no, because we also have to be careful. And the point is not to re-traumatize people. And that's a whole topic. But, but how do we start in these small, really normalizing ways? And I think when we do that, well, then it really, we can do that with other people too. And it comes out. So I think your folks, if it's done well, I think they also can feel comfortable to bring these things out. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Ilya, for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Invitation to come here. Ilya will be in Europe this year because she's part of our leadership program in Ashoka. So mostly several times in Vienna. So maybe we can invite her for a further discussion. If you have an idea, maybe if there is like a broader community, I think that we can organize something maybe next month when you will be here. I'm very happy that there are people interested in the idea and the scaling of Avdia to the Czech Republic. And as you see, and what I like about Ashoka Fellows and social entrepreneurs, when they see a problem, when they see an opportunity, they would like to act. And that's very important. They would like to act. And sometimes they need to have a team to stop them, acting immediately, because their commitment to change the world is so big that it's hard, right? To resist.
I mean, to be honest, in disclosure, I mean, that's true. I mean, for me, I was like so committed and passionate and doing that about a year and a half ago, I mean, I had a really major burnout, and really felt, my God, I mean, I have to heal myself right now, because there's no way we can work on trauma healing and mental health and everything if we ourselves, and if I as a leader am not okay, and if I'm allowing myself to get to this level, I mean, I can't even talk about this, I mean, I have to really do something about it. And so, I think what you're saying is true. And, and it's really like from all levels. I mean, we've so many, so many times we've been in places working also with police, with military, and they've said, we need this from the presidency level, like our leadership is needing this first and foremost, because, that's a level where it's perpetuating more, damage and harm, because we're not healing ourselves, so, yeah.
difficult
but
and broad topic, and also the broad topic is the well-being of social entrepreneurs who would like to act and change the world, and who is taking care of their well-being as well, because they are taking care of others. But that's a completely different topic. Thank you, Ilya, for coming.
thank you
If you
so
would like
much.
to stay for, I think that we can stay longer here, and you would like to have like informal questions and there is a wine, just feel free to stay. Thank you very much for coming online as well. We don't have wine for you, but you can open something in your home place or wherever you are. Do we have any more questions or comments online, Ilka? Exactly. And like to close the session, we have a video that you prepare from my organization and we can watch it. So it's a nice ending.
So we didn't plan on playing the whole video because it's 9 minutes. And also we didn't know that people would be speaking English, and the video is in English and has subtitles in English because the English is hard to maybe to understand. But so we just had some, few clips of it that we can show.
Yeah.
And then if you want to see the whole thing, it's also accessible. Yeah.
Successful training.
Most of this video, it's from a national trauma healing initiative in South Sudan that we were across multiple states, and working with various actors on civil society, teachers, health workers, parents, and also at the governmental level with police and military and prisons. So kind of across the board, very different systems that we were working with.
Does it work, Tika?
Successful training. And not only for South Sudanese, but even we, the peacekeepers, we have also gone through, we are even more traumatized, especially when we are coming from countries where we don't normally go through these things, and come all of a sudden, and you are always put to a place where fighting, shooting every day. We are traumatized, but we are lucky to have gone through this training, and we will be able to control our trauma and be able to impact it to others.
Right now, to just give you a little flavor of how some things can look.
Because I can't hear any good thing, and even nobody will come and rescue myself to tell me how I can control myself.
We have received need also to be given to others, and we make training for trainers, TOT. So I will make a report and I will stress very hard that there is a need to train more officers, to have more courses and to have more workshops, so that they also can go and stimulate this information and awareness to our forces of really what the skill I have acquired, and then to put that skill in practice as a part of feedback. In the beginning, I gave a best example of myself, that I didn't know how to care for myself. But at the end, it has been taught that I should care for myself before I care for others. And then how do I care of myself? I was very violent with my family before I could come here, because they will come with a lot of demands which I cannot meet. And I will tell them frankly that the minimum wages I have, I cannot cover this. We have to patronize, see the priorities. And then they will start shouting and I will shout at them. And I didn't know that they are traumatized. But toward the end of the day, I discovered that they had trauma. So I started even making my own healing and their healing. And now my temperature has gone down. And it has become normal that anybody can be traumatized. Yeah, it is not only those who are going naked and those going crazy, even professionals or elites, yeah, even doctors, they can be traumatized. So we have come to know that this thing, it has no age, it has no boundaries. Yeah. Anybody could have it. Yeah. But the most important is to identify it. And how do you go about with it?
Yeah, if you're interested, you can see the whole video
We can send
online.
it.
But yeah, thank
Okay,
you.
yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us and for your time, staying this late. And I think I would be so happy to follow up with some of you and to exchange contacts and to really stay in touch and see what we can do coming up together. If you're interested, I would be happy.
Thank you for your
Thank
work,
you.
for making the world a better place. And thank you for coming. And I think that we can give an applause. Yeah. Thank you that you were with us online, and see you in the next Ashoka Talks.